Welcome to the Marketing Trail Guide Podcast, Season 1, Opportunities in Crisis. I'm your host, Kevin Krusiewicz, founder of Marketing Trail Guide and fractional Chief Marketing Officer for companies running on the Entrepreneurial Operating System, or EOS. This is Episode 8, the Post COVID Economic Flywheel. And my guest is Will Crist, professional EOS implementer and longtime sales trainer and business consultant. Will and I spoke on May 8th of this year, and we talked about the fact that there's really no new normal, the importance of injecting cash into the consumer economy by keeping a healthy payroll, and how the entrepreneurial operating system helps companies adapt, survive, and thrive during critical times. So please sit back and enjoy my interview with Will Crist. So Will, just want to welcome you to the podcast today. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you. I've been looking forward to it.
So anybody that's been watching or listening to the podcast or, been talking with me lately is probably aware that I'm pretty excited about EOS. You're a professional implementer. Can you sort of break down what that even means and what are the different ways people can implement EOS in their business?
Well, there's a number of ways to implement EOS, as there are with most things. Some people have been implementing EOS all along and didn't know it, simply because they had figured out, pulled together all the various things that are working in the country right now in terms of business. Others read the book Traction and self-implement. They start doing it themselves. Now, EOS, founded by Gino Wickman, one of the goals that Gino had was to help companies all around the world get better, help leaders to get what they want from their business. So he was more concerned about getting the message out and helping people to change their business behaviors and getting better results than he was about making a bunch of money. And so when he put it together, what he created is a number of ways for people to use the material that he had put together. And really, he pulled it together from a variety of places in the business community to have a system for helping people to learn how to get better. Mm-hmm. So people can get on to Basecamp at eosworldwide.com. They can purchase a subscription, and they can see everything that they need to know in order to implement. Now, that's not always the most efficient and effective way, but it is a way. After that, people like me who have joined the community, gone to boot camp, been trained, and then participate in the now 350 implementer community around the world, we regularly look at the best practices and help each other to help companies get what they want from their business the most effective and efficient way possible. And so the various levels are there. We're professionals. It's a full-time job for me. I can have about 20 clients. That's full for me. That's the way we implement it, because we have a system for implementation that works.
Yeah. So you're the second professional EOS implementer that I've had on the show, and yet there's probably many people out there that don't fully understand what EOS or the Entrepreneurial Operating System is, or what it can do for them. And so I wonder if you'd give us kind of a 30,000 foot view over the 6 components of it, and why and when, and what are sort of the events in which people might begin to take a look at EOS for their business.
Well, the real issue for EOS is that we help business owners get what they want from their business, and we do that with this complete system with simple tools to help business owners get 3 things that we call vision, traction, healthy. Now, vision means getting the leaders 100% on the same page with where the organization's going and how it's going to get there. traction from the standpoint of helping the leaders become more disciplined and accountable. They're executing really well to achieve every part of that vision. And then healthy, meaning helping the leaders become a healthy, functional, cohesive leadership team. Because unfortunately, leaders don't often function well as a team, right? Mm-hmm. And so from there, as goes the leadership team, so goes the rest of the entire organization. And we get to the point where the entire organization is crystal clear on the vision. It's all much more disciplined and accountable. In executing the vision, it's gaining consistent traction and advancing as a healthy, functional, cohesive team. Now, that's what we do. And if anybody resonates with that, there's a number of things they can do. They can go buy the book Traction. They can communicate with you, and you can ask me, and I'll send them a book of the book Traction. They can call one of the professional implementers. They can get on to eosworldwide.com and take a look at there's a lot of information there. They can call one of the implementers that they can find on that site, and we'll give them 90 minutes of our time to share with them what EOS is and how it can work or might work in their business to help them get vision, traction, and healthy.
So Will, right now I feel like the cultural moment that we're in not yet out of COVID, and this is being recorded kind of end of the first week of May, and so when this releases, who knows where we're going to be in 4 or 5 weeks to time, something like that. Will we be, on some kind of continued lockdown? Will things be wide open? Nobody knows what the new normal is, right? And so I think what's maybe top of mind for a lot of business owners is how do I survive? In many cases, like how do I just get through the next day and continue to run this business versus maybe 2 or 3 months ago, what they were thinking was, well, I'm doing pretty well. The economy's healthy. Things seem to be great. How do I optimize for another 1% of profits or enjoyment or something like that? But now we're on this kind of crisis management mode, and I think personally, as a fractional chief marketing officer that works with companies that are running on EOS, I've experienced firsthand how the EOS framework and the various frameworks within it, the tools within it, can actually help companies deal with crisis and move through crisis. I know one of the things that you and a few of your peers from the professional implementer side are doing this thing called Lead Now. Tell us about Lead Now. What is it? What tools from the EOS framework are you using in that format, and maybe a story or two about how you're seeing some companies that are joining you for that are participating and getting some resources.
All right, so let me tell you the thinking behind Lead Now. When you look historically at the American economy over the last 100 years, the place where the most jobs have been built, have been created, are in this you might think of it as a narrow but very large niche, and it's generally between 10 and 250 employees, not startups and not major corporations. The health of this economy, where workers get their satisfaction, where they make money to fuel the economy, since we're in a consumer economy, is from that group of companies, 10 to 250 employees. Yeah. Now, there is no new normal. I think we should eliminate normal from our dictionary for right now. Okay. What we have is an enormous opportunity for people to move beyond where they were. And I agree with you. Up until 3 months ago, we were looking for how do we increase profit? How do we make my business more profitable? Where we are now is we are, as a country, and the burden particularly falls on this 10 to 250 employee group, because we're nimble, we're entrepreneurial, we solve problems. That's what these companies are made to do. That means that the speed at which the economy's flywheel is going to get rolling depends upon this 10 to 250 employee,
which has been significantly impacted by all of the closures and restrictions surrounding COVID.
Well, that's right. And what this means is we are not going to go back and try to do what we did before. No restaurant in the next 12 to 18 months is going to be doing the same thing that they did before. Now, the creative, entrepreneurial DNA that put people in this spot is what will carry them through, because they will figure out, they will play around with, they will imagine, they will collaborate with each other, and they will come up with plans for their enterprise. And that's the responsibility. And we're no longer looking for how to increase profit. The new challenge that I believe we're facing is, how do I employ the most people in my enterprise and maintain my sustainability? How do I keep my business going? I mean, that means I have to have enough money to pay my bills, but at the same time, how do I hire and employ as many as possible? Because I individually, you individually, will not survive economically alone.
So that sounds counterintuitive, or it sounds like employees for employees' sake. Is that what you're saying, or do you have something else in mind?
It's employees for the sake of the economic community, because every one of those employees does not put the money in the bank.
Okay.
They go buy it. And if you don't believe that they go buy it, go look at Costco. We were at Walmart yesterday. Yeah. People are buying all of this.
So the contribution of the business owner to the broader society and the recovery comes through employing people and putting money back in the hands of the population.
Absolutely. And it's for the next 12 to 18 months, our focus is going to be on how do we get the money back into the economy so consumers can spend it. That's where the flywheel starts moving.
Okay.
And the more money that we can put into our payroll, the more money there is in the economy. If you look back on the Great Depression, the money was always there. It wasn't that we didn't have money. It's that we didn't have people who had confidence in putting businesses together and employing people. And so what has happened here is we're going to learn very quickly, it's not a matter of how do I personally garner all the wealth for me as a business owner. It's how do I participate in the total economic community. And the way that I can best do that is solve problems that are my core focus, and use and employ the maximum number of people that I can while maintaining the sustainability of my enterprise.
So this idea of just kind of, rising tides lifts all boats. If we can get the economy moving, that's going to benefit all of us.
Absolutely. I mean, that is the only thing that's going to benefit all of us. So, the federal government, I don't think the federal government is going to be in a position to have, what are we at now? 30 million, 32 million people unemployed. Yeah. I don't think we can imagine a infrastructure works program that the federal government or even state governments can support to put all of those people to work, but individual businesses can.
Okay, so you've really kind of challenged my thinking, because the way, I don't know if this is a wiring thing for me or if it's just what I've been sort of taught, is that from our efficiency's sake, you actually you're looking for more efficient, less expensive ways to do things. And if I can employ some kind of system, digital system, automation, as a business owner, like I've got a finite amount of cash, whether that's from the PPP or EIDL or whatever it is, some kind of SBA loan. I have a finite amount of cash, and I could solve, going back to our issue here of, I have a problem to solve, and I can solve those problems one of two ways. I can hire somebody to do it, or I could hire, 3 or 4 people to do it. Or if I could get one person to do it instead of 3 or 4 and automate the rest, that sounds like a more efficient, smarter way to spend my money, my PPP money or something like that, right? What do you say to that narrative where I guess I've just been so ingrained about it, efficiency, and how does that jive with what you're saying about we got to get paychecks out there?
Well, let's wonder for a moment, whatever you are selling, who is going to buy it? And do they have the money to buy it? Where do they get the money to buy it? There's a big flywheel there.
Right.
It starts right there at everybody's payroll.
Sure.
Because if there is not enough money circulating the economy, no matter how tight you make your company, how efficient you make your company, how small you make it,
Yep.
if there's nobody with money to buy it, or if they do not have the confidence to buy it, you will fail.
Sure. And so where my mind goes with that is, and we get into shifts in the market, right? Where all of a sudden you had all this cash, you had this all liquidity, but now you have a scenario where everybody's hoarding, or they literally have nothing to hoard, and so from a market opportunity, as somebody who's selling a product or service, I now have to re-identify who has money, and do I have something, or can I make something, product or service, that they can afford and that solves a problem for them? And so a lot of the shifts that you see in the economy are addressing the conundrum that you are describing, but they're not doing it in a way that's saying, well, we're just going to employ people so that they'll have cash and then.
Not just employ people. I'm not saying it's just employ. It's not just going to willy-nilly employ people in the same way that the government's saying we're sending out $600, or $1,000 checks.
Right.
That's not what I'm talking about.
Okay.
What I'm talking about is leadership. And leadership means I am positive about our ability to find our core focus as a team, and then to be able to provide for people who want that need within the constraints that we're going to experience in the next 6, 12, 18 months.
Okay. So you brought up a word.
Now that's entrepreneurial.
Yeah. Now you brought up a word, core focus. And while we were offline, we were talking about this Lead Now SoCal thing and IDS. Could you kind of retell that story about the company in Hawaii and how they re-identified their core focus?
IDS the tool is to identify if you have a problem, so often people come in and just start solving the problem. And they may solve the problem, but most of the time they solve not the problem itself, but a symptom of the problem. Mm-hmm. And so then they solve that, and it comes back, and the problem's still there. So the IDS system is identify the real problem. Do not move forward to coming up with any solutions until you identify the real problem, and then begin to discuss it. And this is not an argument. This is not a control or seeking power or I'm right, you're wrong. We're looking for the absolute best solution for the greater good of the company. That's what we're looking for. And only then, after we've explored every possibility, do we select one and then go out and execute it. So yesterday we were on a conversation with a company in Hawaii. Now, this company was, before the virus, they were very, very involved with corporations who wanted to incentivize their people, motivate their people, celebrate their people. So they would fly lots of people to Hawaii. They would create events in various places in the United States or worldwide. They also had a part of their business was to help families celebrate marriages, weddings.
So they were in the talent. They were in the talent retainment business because we had a 3% unemployment rate, and companies were trying to figure out, how do I keep my people? Well, you send them to Hawaii. That's what you do. Exactly. Now we have a radically different environment.
Well, all of a sudden the constraints were no flying,
yes, no
big groups. And so the company here, when the two of the people are on it, they said, well, our problem is we don't have any money coming in.
Right.
So I said, all right, so let's ask some questions. Let's see if we can find out what the real problem is. And we began to look at what their core focus was. And their core focus became, when they read it to, because they had been self-implementing EOS, and their core focus was something along the lines of, we help companies have fun. We help them motivate and celebrate their employees. We help them build teams. We also help families and smaller organizations celebrate significant events. I said, okay, that's your core focus. Is your problem that you do not know how to do that given the current constraints? They said, well, that's interesting. I said, well, do you think it's possible to, well, first of all, do you think that there are companies out there or families out there who are looking for ways to celebrate their employees, to increase productivity as they're working from home, to find out how to celebrate when we're all at home? And they said, well, yeah. And I said, do you think that they would be willing to pay for events that were demonstrably, had a demonstrable impact on productivity, joy, fun? And I said, do you think that families, even families in Hawaii, are looking for ways to celebrate because they don't get to have a graduation?
Right.
Are they looking for creative ways to do that? And they said, well, yeah, but that would, we don't know how to do that. Oh, do you think there's anybody in the world who does? And it just changed their whole perspective, because then the problem was not, we don't have money coming in. The real problem was, we have our core focus. There's a need out there. We don't know how to meet that need with the current constraints. And then secondly, we believe there are people who do know how to do that. We don't yet have a relationship with them. And then what they next said was, wow, we got something to do next week, because we're going to start looking around for companies who are looking for that kind of, program. And we're going to start looking for people who already know how to do that.
Right.
Change their whole perspective. Now, how many people should they have on their payroll? Everybody who contributes to doing that. And that means look for people out there who can do that, who want to do it and who know how to do it. Maybe they love doing it and they're great at it. Mm-hmm. And sure. How many people should they have employed? As many as they can, while maintaining their sustainability as a company.
So a couple, just reading between the lines a little bit, a couple of things I heard you say are the assumption is that there's a new market. There's a different market. Obviously, the market has shifted. What was a valuable product, service, delivered in a specific way to a specific market, some of those assumptions in the market have now drastically changed. And so by going through the IDS session or the Lead Now SoCal event that they attended, they were able to get a perspective on the fact that what they do is valuable, but maybe that things had to shift. Their focus had to shift from how they were delivering it before to what the new need in the market is relevant to that offering. And so now they're brainstorming and solving the issue of, okay, so who is the market? What do they want now? And how can we organize ourselves to deliver something that people will pay for?
Well, it's not deliver something, because we know exactly what people will pay for, right? It's not how do we get them to buy something that we have. It's how do we find out what they want?
That's right.
How do we find out what they want? And I have companies right now in my backyard, my clients, who are saying to me, well, we don't want to lay off any of our companies, and we got a couple $100,000 in PP help. So now, but they're all working at home, and my concern is that they're blowing off the time. They're not really. And I had to help him think through the change. Entrepreneurs don't work 40 hours and stop and say, I've done my work. Mm-hmm. We are going to be, for the next foreseeable future, an entrepreneurial culture in business, which means we don't hire, reward, celebrate based upon how many hours people put in. Sure. We look at results. Yep. And so results are the connection between a huge need and a powerful core focus. This is what, yeah?
Finish that thought, and we're going to take a break in a minute.
All right. The need out there is what people like you, marketers, help fuel, help identify what's the need out there. Right now, there's a huge need for people to learn how to celebrate, how to motivate, how to account for people who are working remotely. Sure. So that's a huge need. When somebody's core focus as a company is to give joy, to motivate, to celebrate, to build teams, well, that's where the need and the core focus come together. Now, the question is, how do we provide it? And that, to me, is the most exciting thing, because that's what entrepreneurs do all day long.
Yep. How do we, and by providing it, how do we productize it, package it, deliver it, monetize it, service it, and all of the other the components of that? How do we provide it? So I want to come back and talk about your role in the process of getting these companies to think maybe beyond what they can think about internally when we come back. So we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back in just a minute.
From a very young age, I remember in 6th grade being taught in sex education that an abortion is just a woman's choice, and that's it. That's the only thing they teach you. It's not a baby. It's part of the woman's body, and she gets to decide whether it lives or dies. I grew up in Springfield, Massachusetts, in a very Catholic and supportive family.
My husband and I, Jerry, have 5 children. Veronica is the youngest, and I always told her, I know God has great plans for you. I had always told her that. In high school, and even junior high, she had lots of struggles with anxiety and depression and problems in school.
I would just not want to get out of bed. I had no motivation to do schoolwork or be around family or friends. I kind of secluded myself in my room. It was Christmas Day of 2018. I was 16 years old. My boyfriend was 18 at the time. We had been dating for about 4 months. I felt that something was off with me. So I looked up some symptoms online, and it was matching up with pregnancy. I went to the store to get the pregnancy tests, went home, I took one, and almost immediately the second line came up, which means that you're pregnant. I was just in disbelief at first. I was like, no way, I'm not pregnant, not me. A couple hours later, I took another one, and also was positive. I have a very close relationship with my mother, so I decided to tell her first. I went up to her and I showed her the tests, and she had already had a feeling that I was pregnant because I was acting differently than I usually do.
I was a little bit shocked, but I knew that I would support her. You definitely have always been pro-life, and I knew without a doubt I would never want Veronica to have an abortion.
My boyfriend told me he wanted me to have an abortion. His first reaction was just that he was very afraid. I understood where he was coming from because I was afraid as well. I knew that he wanted me to have an abortion, and I felt pressured to do so just because I didn't want to ruin his life or alter his life in a big way when it's not something that he wanted. I actually went down to Planned Parenthood. I was put in a room with this woman, and instead of her talking to me about my options or resources or different ways I could get help, it felt like she was a salesperson and she was trying to sell me on abortion. That just didn't sit right with me. And I knew that that wasn't the place I needed to be, and that's when I went home and did my own research. I searched on YouTube, what is an abortion, and I came across Live Action's video where the doctor describes in detail at each stage of pregnancy how the baby is killed. I just felt so upset and sad. After I saw that video, I just cried. I knew if I hadn't found that video, that might have been my son who was being described in the abortion procedures, and I might have gone through with something without knowing what I was truly doing. I knew that he was a person, and that he was alive, and that killing him at any stage of life would be wrong.
The truth is powerful, and I'm so glad she came across that.
My boyfriend saw that video also, and it moved us both, and we knew that we couldn't do that. My baby was over 9 pounds, so I had to have a C-section. They brought me in, and it was about a 30-minute process. The moment I heard him cry, I was just like, I couldn't believe it, and I was so emotional because it felt like it was a blessing that he was there, and I could have almost taken his life away, and I was just so happy to hear his voice. That's a moment I'll never forget, and I just feel blessed to be his mom. I think a lot of women do choose abortion because they're afraid of the lack of support, and also I think they're just uneducated and not completely aware of what they're doing. Your pregnancy isn't just a blob of cells, it is a human being, and it deserves to live. Don't be afraid. There's so many resources out there that can help you if you are pregnant. I had my boyfriend there with me. He's been a great dad. He's really stepped up. I've been helped by people who I didn't even know existed. I'm really thankful that I found that video and that I found the resources I did and that I have my son. He really saved my life.
Welcome back to the podcast. I'm joined today by Will Crist. He's a professional EOS implementer. And Will, we've been talking about opportunities in crisis and how companies are responding to the new reality that we're facing in COVID land here. And one of the things that we mentioned in the first segment was this concept of IDS, or identify, discuss, and solve, which is one of the many tools that are part of the EOS framework. And you and a couple other professional implementers have been participating for free in helping companies through these Lead Now SoCal sessions. And you know, you'd mentioned that the company from Hawaii had been self-implementing for a while. And I'm always interested in, you know, the dynamic between, you know, implementing something. There's plenty of tools online. There's books you can read. There's perspective you can get. I know as a certified StoryBrand guide, there's a lot of people who have read the book, but then they get into a position where they need a third party. They need an objective set of eyes. Maybe if you could talk a little bit about some of the value and some of the augmentation that a professional implementer brings in general versus kind of a DIY approach, maybe that third party perspective, and how that can really help move people and companies to the next level in their ownership, in their adoption, and the value that they're getting from the EOS system.
Well, the role that an implementer plays is similar to the role that an installer plays when you bring in a new machine, or you're going to change your software, or you're going to buy a new networking system. Somebody has to teach people how to use that. Now, we know that training is not a one-day event. We don't bring in somebody and let them just spill it all onto the floor. Somehow we have to follow that up. All right, but to be very clear, we know that you know, Thomas Gordon taught us a long time ago in a parenting book about it takes 7 times before people even listen enough to hear what you're saying. Mm-hmm. And so it's not a one-day event. Mm-hmm. So in the same way that you bring somebody in to teach them how to teach your people how to use a new system, a new machine, a new set of software, that you bring in somebody to teach you how to use an operating system. Mm-hmm. And like I said, that doesn't happen overnight. It's not a one-time thing. Our system is at least 2 years, and it starts off with training your leadership team how to use EOS. What is this about? What are the buttons? What are the consequences? What's the processes? What's the systems? What are the tools, and how do we use them? And those first 3 sessions, full day, 7 hours off-site with your leadership team, we teach those. And after that, it's a quarterly session where we're looking back at what you said you would do in this 90 days, because we're living in a 90-day world now. That's what we help people to see, is that 90 days is a time where we begin to fray, we begin to forget what we said we would do. So take a look at what we said we would do. We expect when we're hitting on all cylinders, we're getting 80% of those, what we call rocks, those major events done, 100% done, not maybe, not kind of, but 100% done. So we get 80% of those every 90 days. That's our goal. So in that 90-day session, that quarterly session, we look back and ask, how did we do? We do a little more training on some tools, because we have 20 tools that we use in EOS. And then we move forward looking, what do we want to accomplish in the next 90 days? We do that every 90 days. At the end of the year, we have a 2-day session where we spend more time working on building support with the team health. But we also looking back at the year, looking forward to the next year. Now, this whole system gets rolled out to the entire company so that everybody has rocks. Everybody is participating in solving problems using their creativity. Everybody is respected as part of the boat that's rowing in one direction, all rowing at the same time. So that's what the implementer does. And generally, when people look around for an implementer, they might talk to 2 or 3 of them, and they're going to find that all of the professional implementers, all 350 of us, do exactly the same thing. It's a very simple thing. We're not consultants. We're there to facilitate a company adopting, using, and making this system part of their DNA. Now, I'll tell you, it's very interesting. When I was a Sandler trainer, which I was trained salespeople and sales managers for 18 years, it was somewhat easy to get a business owner, a CEO or president, to start talking about his salespeople and where they were limited. It's them. Can you help us fix them?
Right.
What I've discovered in working with business owners about EOS, which is really a lot about what kind of culture, what kind of management system that business owner has.
Right.
It's a lot more difficult for him or her to admit, and certainly not in front of their employees, right, that they don't know how to move forward to the next level, or that they're working way too hard, or that people aren't doing what they said they would do. It's very difficult for them to admit that. And so that's why this 90-minute meeting is really the key. Sure. Because if they resonate with any of the issues, vision, traction, health, any of those problems, and allow the implementer to come in and spend 90 minutes with the leadership team, then the whole leadership team can assume responsibility for some of those issues that are there. Sure. And it kind of slides into, well, we'll move into implementing EOS without having to admit that the leader is part of the problem.
Mm-hmm. So everything that you're just describing is, I think, one of the key reasons that I, as a fractional marketing executive, really only want to be focused on working with companies that are running on EOS. The way I describe it is there are those areas of unhealth, but when there's a common operating system, a common set of expectations, a common scorecard, common language, the cadence or the pulse of meeting together is understood, how those meetings are conducted is shared. All of these systems, it really makes my job not only a lot easier, but a lot more effective, because we're all, like you said, rowing in the same direction. And it's so much more efficient that it's really caused me to focus my practice on working with those companies that are running on EOS. earlier in the first segment, we were talking about the recovery and how employing people is critical and will continue to be critical to that recovery. And it got me thinking about the roles of the people in the organization. It got me thinking about the AC chart, or the accountability chart. It got me thinking about right people in the right seat. And so what are you observing? What are you noticing? And maybe even how are you coaching your clients to be thinking about their accountability chart, how to be thinking about right person, right seat? And maybe you can even just give us a little bit of a primer on how an accountability chart differs from what people traditionally think of in terms of the organizational chart.
Well, organizational chart to me means that we're looking at a group of people and we want to organize them. And so we organize them, and I don't know that there is a common way of organizing people using organizational chart. And some that I've seen have dotted lines and arrows and colors, and it's all over the place. What we see, and we call the accountability chart, in this process, we start off with an assumption that any company has basically three roles. One is, how do you get people in to look at your product and your service? How do we find people who have that need that we talked about earlier? Sales and marketing. We have a box, and we call it a box for sales and marketing. Next is operations. How do you produce what it is that you're providing to solve the problem that you have found that this prospect has? And then the third box is finance. We call it finance, and it's really all the things that make the company work. It could be HR, it could be IT, it could be AR, it could be AP, all of these things that make the organization work. So we start off with those three. These are leadership roles. And then what we put into that is, what are the 5 roles that are in each of those boxes? What do we, not people yet. We start with structure, people later. What is it that needs to happen in that sales and marketing box? And sometimes sales and marketing splits up into 2, but what do we expect from that box? That becomes the accountability that we're looking for with whoever is going to be in that box. But first, we're going to get clear. If our company has these things coming out of sales and marketing, we'd be successful. Mm-hmm. If operations does these things, and sometimes there's more than one operations box, but if operations generates these things, we are successful. And if finance generates these things, has successfully performs these roles, we're successful. Now, there's one more person on this leadership team, this accountability box, the accountability chart where we start, and we call it the integrator. Mm-hmm. Now, the integrator sits in the leadership team. He's not a general manager. He's not the person who tells everybody what to do. Mm-hmm. That's very often one of the problems that our senior leaders have, is when they are the ones who tell everybody what to do, their day is chewed up with people standing in lines outside their office saying, "What do you want me to do next?" Right. But when you get people who know and want to perform those roles, then the role of that integrator is to help the team work harmoniously together to accomplish the vision that they agreed upon, that they developed, that they said, that is where we're going together. All right, so the integrator's job is to help them move forward. Now, getting really clear in that accountability chart and then rolling it out through the rest of the organization so that everybody in an organization, number one, knows exactly where the company's going. They know what they are responsible to provide, because we don't put anybody in those boxes who doesn't do 3 things. They don't get it, i.e., it's just part of their DNA to do those things, understand how that fits into a business. Number 2, they absolutely want it. GW, they want it. They bounce out of bed in the morning, just like you do, just like I do. These are things we want to do, we're passionate about. And then finally, C, GWC, they have the capacity. They have the capability of performing those roles. And when you have only people in those boxes who agree with your core values and they GWC that spot, your company is going to be humming.
So one of the really unique things that I think the accountability chart does is that you can see, especially in a small company where you don't have a lot of silos, you can see a given person in different boxes across the accountability chart. And I'll give you one example, and I just think this is really interesting. So one of my clients, whom I'm a fractional CMO for, I sit in that sales and marketing, or we call it revenue, as the combined idea. But essentially, I'm responsible and I own marketing on the accountability chart. And that's my role. And I report to the integrator in that role. But underneath me, in my section of the AC chart, I have somebody else that is a sales closer that reports to me. And she actually owns the company. And so even though we haven't talked about the visionary yet, her role is, she's all over the org chart. It's a small company, but she's a visionary. She has a clinical role because this is a medical practice, but she actually reports to me. And so in our quarterly conversation this morning before this recording, we're having a great conversation, and she's talking about how I, as her leader, am making certain decisions. And so that, I thought that's an interesting, I don't know if inversion is the right way to think about it, because that's not consistently inverted, but it's this interesting juxtaposition of somebody who owns the company and ultimately I work for it in one regard, but also who works for me. Wondering if you've seen that in any of your other clients, and maybe do you have any thoughts on the unique quality about the AC chart in that way?
Well, it's about the EOS practice, because entrepreneurs, founders, tend to start off alone. They see a problem, they're going to fix it. They may dream about it, they may be given a vision, they may find a group that's going to help them organize it, like the Y Combinators up in San Francisco. But they are the ones responsible in their minds for making this happen.
Right.
And as they begin to expand the scope of the business, they begin to add on assistance. Oh, I need somebody to help me with this. I need somebody to take care of this. I need somebody but they're looking for somebody who will do what they said to do.
Yeah.
And it comes to the point where the founder, could be the CEO, could be the owner, begins to be frenetic because they can't do everything. Right. They don't know everything. With all the medical changes with HIPAA and Obamacare, and most CEOs were way out of their comfort zone. All right, so you begin to look for people who have an expertise, who know how to make that work. And so one of the big shifts for somebody coming to EOS, the company coming to EOS, is the owner, who everybody looks up to and says, what do you want to have done next, relinquishes that role and says, well, of course, I'm going to wind up with revenue from this enterprise, but there are people who are better at being integrators than I am. There are people who are better at selling than I am. There are people who are better at operations than I am. There are people who are better at finance than I am. And very often that founder becomes, you mentioned the visionary, very often that visionary sits up there and sits at 30,000 feet, comes up with great ideas, lots of great relationships around the country, but they hate being in the nitty-gritty of the business. And they don't have to be. There are people out there who beg, who are looking for, who love to work in that nitty-gritty, who love to have those difficult conversations, holding people accountable for what those people said they would do. That's an integrator. That's a leader. And so it's shifting from that, and we have to carefully help that group to begin to understand that whereas they used to see the owner as the one who made all the decisions, they begin to understand that they are the owners of the destiny of the company.
Right.
And that owner, the founder, the president, that whatever that role that person had, they're certainly sitting on the leadership team, but they're not making all the decisions alone. It's a tremendous relief, and it's a tremendous outpouring of enthusiasm and motivation. I can tell you story after story about people who were, when they began to see what this happened in the first 3 to 6 months, they blossomed. They began to get back into school and learn how to do things. They took on responsibilities nationally in terms of working with peer groups around the country. Lots of things that people did on their own because they wanted to and they were good at it.
So now we're in this season in COVID and post-COVID where there have been layoffs, there have been furloughs, there have been changes to the accountability chart, or at least the names in the boxes potentially, or there will be changes. How are you coaching business owners to think about how to make those changes in an elegant way?
Well, when we begin with the accountability chart, we went through with every client all across the country and offered them the opportunity, in this case is generally at no cost, to take a look at their accountability chart and do what we called a reverse accountability chart. That meant if we were to lose 25% of our revenue or 50% of our revenue, what would need to be here? Not people, but what boxes would we need to have in this organization to thrive? Not to survive, but to thrive. To take a look at, again, at our core focus, just like we did with the group in Hawaii. I mean, one of their next steps is going to be looking at their accountability chart. Who do we need to have on here to live in this new world? And so we help them to look at what would happen if all of a sudden 50% of revenue was gone. Now, not who would we lay off, but what boxes do we need to thrive? Sure. And then who in our organization first would we put in those boxes? And who in the world who's not currently in our organization do we need to have in those boxes? So it really has to do with not about people. Right. People come after you set the structure up.
Do you find that itself, that statement, is a radical paradigm shift for people? Are most people thinking people first? Most business owners are thinking people first and let's find a place for this person? Or are they thinking role first?
Well, I got to tell you, there are two problems that people always have, organizations always have. Once we get clear that we're EOS, in order to be in EOS, you need to be using EOS, the commitment is that 100% of your organization is going to be in the right, they're going to be right people in the right seats. Now, right people mean they agree with your core values. Mm-hmm. They're not out there chipping away at it every day and eventually killing it because they disagree with what your core values are. So you got to have the right people. Yep. And you have to be in the right seat. They have to GWC, they get it, want it, and have the capacity for it. Now, the two problems are, sometimes you have people who just love the core values. They live them out all day long. They're wonderful people. You'll enjoy being with them. Sometimes they may even be your relatives, but they just have these core values, but they don't GWC the seat. Right. Now, unless you are a nonprofit or a training organization, you got to deal with this, as difficult as it is. And if you're a large enough organization, you might be able to move them around to find a place where they do GWC it. So that's one difficulty. Another is when you have somebody who just GWCs that seat, this person is excellent at it. They do a great job. They're fulfilling, even exceeding the expectations people have for the results. But they're not the right person. They don't agree with the core values. And again, that's a difficult question. It's a difficult conversation, but you got to do something about it. That person will ultimately affect the organization. He may even kill it.
Mm-hmm. I think what's really helpful, it's really helpful to think in those terms, and even hire, review, reward on those bases. And that's kind of one of the things that are talked about in EOS of at your quarterly conversations, at your annual reviews, looking at that framework. Is there core value alignment? Do they get it? Do they want it? Do they have capacity for it? And that goes for employees. It goes for owners too, relevant to a particular box, right? So if I'm in a box as an owner and I don't get it, or I don't want it, or I don't have the capacity for it, we need to develop a plan to get me out of that box. And that's also just part of that dance that is part of all of this. That's really an interesting dance right now, given circumstances. Will, just kind of rounding the corner here, finishing up our time. What are maybe, some simple next steps for people to be thinking about in terms of getting help that they might need, perspectives they may not have, as they're navigating through these waters? How can they engage you? How can they get access to this Lead Now SoCal? What can they do to begin to get some of these tools at their disposal so they can not only survive this time, but thrive during it?
Well, I think one thing that people can do is they can, I think what I would ask them to do is take a step that might be a little concerning, but take a step, suspend their disbelief for a moment. The EOS professional implementers have committed themselves to helping business owners get what they want from their business. Getting clients is not the biggest problem that we have. Our problem is finding people who are willing to talk to us and be open and honest about what's going on, about what they are not getting from their companies and what they are getting from their companies that they don't want. There are three questions that we ask them in that 90-minute meeting that we have, which is the direction that people can take by requesting a 90-minute meeting. Those three questions are: tell me about your accountability on a scale of 1 to 10. What's accountability? If somebody says that they got a 9 or a 10 and the whole group agrees, that's not a problem. We want to know, what's the quality of your meetings, which is a big time sink for many companies. Yeah. If they're telling us that our meetings are great, we get things done, we meet once a week, every week, same time, we finish on time, 9 or 10, not a problem. And then we ask them, well, tell me, how committed is the entire organization to the plan? Sometimes people look at us and say, what plan? Right. But if they say, no, we're 100%, we got 100% people from all the way top down, even the guy sweeping the floor knows where we're going, how we're going to get there, 9 or 10. If everybody agrees that all of those three are not, they don't need us. But we know that most people are operating under conditions that are very, very inefficient, very ineffective. People are working way too hard for what they're getting, and we're there to help them. Mm-hmm. And so what can they do? Go take a look at EOS Worldwide. If we're talking about Southern California, there are 20 implementers here. In Orange County, there are 10. We're all here to help.
And how can people find you specifically, Will?
Well, they can find me specifically in a couple of ways. One, Will Crist at willcrist.com is my website.
WILLCRIST.
Willcrist.com is the website. My email is willcrist@willcrist.com. They can text me or phone me at 949-355-6013. I'm happy to talk with them.
Great. Well, I just want to thank you for joining us today, and encourage our listeners to ponder some of these things, get the book traction, reach out to Will. Will is generous with his time. He's willing to talk with you, find out what's going on with you, have a, kind of no obligation consultation. I don't get anything from that introduction. Just to make that clear, I'm just interested in helping business owners succeed. I love the EOS system. It makes my job easier, more effective, more fun. And so, Will, thanks again for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Will Crist. Please rate this show, give it 5 stars, share it with a friend, and join me for a fascinating episode 9 with global entrepreneur, angel investor, and business accelerator, Grant Van Cleve. We'll see you then.